When I named my original YouTube channel American Krogan, it wasn't something that I put much thought into. It was little more than a lighthearted homage paid to the great American redneck and 80s rock metal bands. At the time, I wasn't particularly aware of many things that I am today. But as I've gone back and reviewed the series with careful criticism, I've been surprised to find that the Krogan are actually one of the most subversive elements in recent gaming history. Now, for those completely unfamiliar, the Krogan are a tough, brutish reptilian race. They're highly aggressive and predatory with many R-selected characteristics. They have a redundant nervous system, as well as a secondary organ system, and they reach sexual maturity very quickly. A Krogan female, under normal circumstances, can lay up to 1,000 eggs in a single year. All of these traits were exceedingly advantageous within the harsh and unpredictable ecology of their homeworld, Tuchanka.
I want to know about Tuchanka's past.
Tuchanka is a place of great gifts. It kills the weak, torments the slow, and destroys the stupid. Survival is an honor, and here, Krogan thrive. We cover this planet with our civilization, only to burn it to the ground 12 times over. Each time, we grow stronger. When we are wise and powerful enough, we will tame the planet forever.
In line with them being an R-selected species with a fast life strategy, the Krogan are also comparatively less intelligent than the other races, and were uplifted into the galactic community by the more intelligent Solarians. But while the Krogan hadn't developed a spacefaring civilization themselves, it should be emphasized here that they were able to split the atom. As the wiki states, quote, "Ancient Krogan society was once rich with cultural, architectural, and artistic accomplishments. However, the Krogan birth rate exploded despite the natural limits of their predatory homeworld once they achieved industrialization. Technology made life too easy for them, so when they looked for new challenges, they found those in each other. Wars were fought over dwindling resources as the Krogan expanded. 4,000 years ago, at the dawn of the Krogan nuclear age, battles that claimed the small pockets of territory capable of sustaining life escalated into full-scale global war. Weapons of mass destruction were unleashed, transforming Tuchanka into a radioactive wasteland. The Krogan were reduced to primitive warring clans struggling to survive a nuclear winter of their own creation, a state that continued until they were discovered by the Solarians 2,000 years later." Unquote. The Solarians had uplifted the Krogan with the hope that they could be deployed as shock troops against the Rachni, another alien race that was rapidly conquering their territory. The Krogan agreed to fight for the Galactic Council, and after virtually exterminating the Rachni, they were rewarded with many pristine planets for them to colonize. But no longer confined to the harsh environment of Tuchanka, and without incurring heavy casualties in various wars, the Krogan numbers now began to exponentially grow again, just as they had during their own industrial revolution. Eventually, they began invading other planets the other races had already colonized, and then refused to leave when asked. Curiously, the other races didn't refer to the endless Krogan expansion into their territory as diversity, nor did they consider it a strength.
Krogan rebellions attack on Council, Vault K-306. This is the only visual record of Krogan Overlord Krennic's attack on the Council. Audio follows.
I've heard enough. If the Krogan hadn't taken on the Rachni, you would all be at their mercy. You won't give us what we deserve, and so you force us to take it. We will never leave the planet of Lucia, no matter how much the Asari cry.
Ambassador Krennic, you only weaken your case with this show of violence.
Wrong, Solarian. Now our case is finally strong. Negotiations are over.
Thence ensued what came to be known as the Krogan Rebellions, an expansionist war against the rest of the galaxy. As the wiki states, quote, "The Krogan sustained massive casualties, but their incredible birth rate kept their population steadily increasing. Victory seemed inevitable. In desperation, the Council turned to the recently discovered Turian hierarchy for aid. The Turians unleashed the genophage on the Krogan homeworlds, a bioweapon engineered by the Solarians. The genophage caused near-total infant mortality in the Krogan species, with only one birth in every 1,000 producing live offspring." Unquote. This isn't the focal point of the video, but I do feel compelled to say it. The Solarians and the Turians were probably right to use the genophage. The Krogan were well compensated for their efforts against the Rachni, but their incredible birth rate forced them to demand more from the other species. These demands ultimately were not something that the other species could concede willingly, and so the Krogan were faced with a choice. Find challenge again in each other, as they did on Tuchanka, or find challenge in other species. Although mostly are selected, the Krogan do seem to draw heavily on Indo-European Monarbung culture. They place great emphasis on strength and military accomplishments. Moreover, their blood rage phenomenon resembles that of Germanic berserkers. Overall, an association with the tribes of the late classical period seems fitting. The Solarians herein would be akin to the Romans enlisting barbarian Krogan aid against the invading Rachni Huns. To add to the smorgasbord of cultural influences, however, some of the female attire, along with the fact that the females live apart from the males, suggest a Middle Eastern influence. The female clans are a fairly overt reference to the harem, wherein women and children lived apart from the men. Often the harem were guarded by eunuchs, and while there aren't Krogan eunuchs, there are designated envoys and guards to their camps.
Speaking for the females is an honor, even if it delays my rite of passage. Say otherwise, and I'll kill you.
In the end, though, I don't think the Krogan are supposed to be a direct reference to a single specific human race or ethne, though they do clearly speak to various groups within different contexts. For example, when we focus on their interaction with the Solarians and Turians, they're often seen as victims of colonialism and genocide. When it comes to internal politics, however, they're a primordial archetype of a patriarchal society undergoing progressive social reform.
Sounds like you've got big changes ahead for the Krogan.
We are making a neutral ground where all clans are welcome. Fertile females can be shared among clans. We will strengthen the race as a whole.
You threaten everything that makes us strong. It will not last.
What do the women of Clan Urdnot think about this plan?
It was our female clan leader's idea. The neutral area is safe, and it encourages more female clans to ally with us. Attacks on Urdnot now endanger the females of all clans. Even clans that want to see me dead will defend Clan Urdnot.
What's so important about maintaining individual clans?
Every clan has different customs, rites of passage, rules of behavior, battle songs, all unique. That diversity makes us great.
How do you maintain security with so many different clans in one place?
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Diversity makes us great.
It can't continue. You are going against what makes us strong.
Sounds like you're not making friends.
Traditionalists like Duvenk are chained barren, always fighting, guiding their pathetic stick in the ground. When the smoke clears, I can plant a flag on their corpses and rally the rest around a new Krogan hub.
Sounds like you're counting on a lot of bloodshed, even after you unite.
On one hand, Rex claims that he appreciates the individuality of all the clans, but he also clearly states that he wants to plant a flag on the corpses of his traditionalist enemies, whose traditionalist ways he's destroying while sharing their females among all other clans in order to strengthen the race as a whole. The idea of exogamy as a path to strength isn't unique to Rex's social reforms either. The Asari, an alien race of monogendered feminists, actually ridicule other Asari who engage in endogamous relations by derogatorily referring to them as blue bloods.
Union with our own kind is no longer common, not for the purposes of reproduction. Most Asari believe it weakens our species. Asari daughters inherit racial traits from the father species. If both parents are Asari, then nothing has been gained, or so conventional wisdom would hold. I am what is sometimes called a pureblood. Though no Asari would ever be cruel enough to say the word to my face, it is a great insult among my people.
You pureblood bitch!
In fact, the prejudice against the Ardat Yakshi, a rare genetic condition in Asari, specifically affecting their nervous systems, is squarely centered on the idea that the disease only survives when Asari mate with other Asari.
I am the genetic destiny of the Asari. They are not ready to reveal this, so I must die. You are a disease to be purged, nothing more.
Rex is a kind of progressive totalitarian despot. While some might view him as a Chad, rounding up all the females into a single camp of his own, what stands out is that this was the female's idea, not his. Rex is essentially little more than the muscle of a Krogan gynecocracy. Female segregation in traditional society, as Rex's opponents understand it, involved females of a particular clan being cordoned off and heavily guarded by its males. They were not shared with males of another clan, and as the wiki highlights, quote, female Krogan rarely leave their homeworlds, focusing on breeding in an attempt to keep Krogan numbers from declining too quickly. The few remaining fertile females who can carry young to term are treated as prizes of war, to be seized, bartered, or fought over. However, purposefully harming a female Krogan is a crime worthy of banishment or worse, unquote. Female sexual market value of any species is almost always higher than that of the males, but the genophage exacerbated this value even further. Normally, such an increase in value wouldn't matter. The strongest males would simply fight it out within and among their clans to see who got the breed.
They try to steal females from rival males to increase the size of their own harems.
But because of the genophage reducing the Krogan birth rate 1,000-fold, they simply can't reproduce enough to replenish the numbers lost to their Darwinian ethos.
Contrary to what survivors claim, the genophage does not produce strong Krogan. The only quality it filters is the ability to survive the genophage. For every 1,000 stillborn, too many weaklings live. Every survivor is branded as precious. That's produced more cuddling than your collective human teats. I say, let us carry the genophage. Let 1,000 die in a clutch. We will defeat it by climbing atop our dead. That is the Krogan way.
It may be somewhat surprising, but much of what Okeer says actually parrots concepts outlined in Hitler's second book. Quote, while nature, out of the multitude of creatures that are born, spares the few healthiest and most robust in the struggle for survival, man reduces the number of births, but then tries to preserve the lives of all those who are born, regardless of their true value and inner quality. His humanity is simply the servant of his weakness, and therefore, in truth, the most terrible annihilator of his existence, unquote. Later, in reference to the ancient Spartan custom of abandoning unfit babies, he states, quote, the abandonment of sick, frail, deformed children, in other words, their destruction, demonstrated greater human dignity and was in reality 1,000 times more humane than the pathetic insanity of our time, which attempts to preserve the lives of the sickest subjects at any price, while taking the lives of 100,000 healthy children through a decrease in the birth rate, or through abortifacient agents, subsequently breeding a race of degenerates burdened with illness, unquote. Since the end of World War II, we've been repeatedly conditioned to view Hitler's perspective as an unreasonable apotheosis of evil, and as something entirely novel. But such ideas weren't new during his time, nor were they restricted to Europe. In fact, there are still undeveloped tribes today who murder diseased infants, and this isn't because they're Nazis or especially cruel. Well, some of them are, I suppose. Now, some of the reasons they cite are irrational from the perspective of modern Western society. But most victims are objectively dysgenic, that is, they have genetic defects that inhibit their survival. Within a non-industrialized setting, most attempts to keep these individuals alive would not only prolong their suffering before they eventually succumb to a natural death, but they would also place enormous stress on the larger group. Whether we like it or not, under normal Darwinian selection, X amount of a population will die off due to maladaptive mutations. Depending on the level of industrialization, X amount of these individuals with said mutations can survive via the efforts and sympathy of greater society. But even an industrialized society has a finite amount of resources and energy. If the number of individuals with maladaptive traits ever surpasses the ability of greater society to cope, then problems will begin to crop up. The effect can be exacerbated by otherwise healthy people being encouraged to forego having children entirely. Now, we probably don't need to start throwing babies off of mountaintops or accuse everyone who engages in deviant behavior of being an inherent mutant. But should our society be celebrating a mother without arms giving birth to a son without arms, while it encourages abortion and childless lifestyles in otherwise healthy people? The comforts of modern life have lulled us into a false belief that we are no longer subject to the laws of nature, and that this progressive insanity can continue on forever. In this regard, all that separates us from some Amazonian tribe is that we've created a greater ability to cope with more stress and more dysgenics. Getting back to Okeer, some of what he says doesn't exactly coincide with the Krogan way. His proposed method to circumvent the genophage, or ignore it, is by genetic engineering, not brute force Darwinian selection. He wants to make a Krogan specimen so pure, so strong, that it won't really matter if only 1 in 1,000 of its offspring survives.
Numbers alone are nothing. The mistake of an outsider.
But an uber Krogan with a low fertility rate wouldn't really be climbing atop the dead in the traditional Krogan sense of brute force Darwinian selection, which is perhaps why the Krogan traditionalists hate Okeer and his tank-bred Krogan Grunt, whose rite of passage is a serious point of contention.
I need Grunt back up to speed. What's wrong with him?
There's nothing wrong with him. He's becoming a full adult.
Puberty ritual, common among species with hormone-driven reproductive urges.
I don't care what aliens call it. Krogan undergo the rite of passage.
Too far, Rex. Your clan may rule, but this thing is not Krogan.
Idiot.
Now, one might see the positive depictions of Grunt in his struggle against the Krogan traditionalists as BioWare's tacit approval of Okeer's genetic engineering program. Perhaps it is, since the UN draws a moral distinction between eugenics and genetic engineering. Quote, "The goal of enhancing individuals and the human species by engineering the genes related to some characteristics and traits is not to be confused with the barbarous projects of eugenics that plan the simple elimination of human beings considered as imperfect on an ideological basis," unquote. I can't help but see Grunt's character as being a similar archetype to Captain America, who was enhanced via a genetic serum to fight the Nazis. What we see within the Captain America moral paradigm is that genetic engineering is considered acceptable, even virtuous, as long as it's combating a greater evil. Just as Captain America wages war against the Nazis, who would have rejected him as weak and deformed, Grunt is waging war against traditionalists, who rejected him up until they realized how strong he actually was.
You say you are pure, no alien meddling in your construction, just the warlord Okeer.
Come on, Uvenk. You want to try killing him? Give it your best shot.
Not yet. This deserves consideration.
Why? I'm not getting any more natural.
You are powerful. You are a mistake. But your potential could tip the current balance of the clans.
You spit on my father's name, on Shepard's name, but now you stop ranting because I'm strong.
No matter which choices you make in Mass Effect 1 and 2, Shepard and Grunt will always end up killing Uvenk and the other traditionalists. This is the case even if your actions resulted in Rex's brother Reeve being put in charge of Clan Erdnot.
Your actions on Vermeer allowed me to wrest leadership away from a bunch of radical reformists. Rex died as a Krogan should. His friends became my friends, and Erdnot found its proper path.
He had troubling ideas. We are better off with a leader who respects tradition.
Now, some will ask here, why would Reeve want Uvenk dead if he himself is also a traditionalist? The answer is that Uvenk was Reeve's competition within the Krogan hierarchy, and moreover, Reeve's character and timeline display the very traditionalism that Rex's social reforms are up against.
What do you think of Reeve?
He worries me. Reeve has the makings of a tyrant. I see it in his eyes when he looks at me. I'm the key to realizing his ambitions.
Hate is good. Influential.
I hope you're not serious about avenging the genophage, Reeve. It would be a disaster for our people.
Our people were made for war. It's what they want.
And you need to be the leader who tells them they're wrong.
Krogan biology may be made for war, but it's an evolutionary dead end. You must adapt, or face the same fate as your ancestors.
A major theme in Mass Effect is that Krogan traditionalism, that is, the Krogan's Darwinian patriarchal warrior ethos, is weakening the race. The solution Rex offers is female liberation, and yet curiously, the one Krogan female you see in the trilogy asserts that ancient Krogan society was actually one of sexual egalitarianism.
How do you think things will change after the genophage is cured?
Our species will find its balance again. Females will help shape the future, like in the ancient days, before we were just pawns of power-hungry males.
Most seem hell-bent on shooting anything that looks at them wrong.
What else is there for them to do? Because of the genophage, they become wandering killers, seeking targets to justify their existence, excuses to earn them honor. Rivalries are the invention of the males. Under their rule, Tuchanka has laid in ruins for over 1,000 years. It's time females took back our place in society and resurrected our future. Malin was our best hope.
Now, technically, the first game never goes into much detail about the status of females, but the impression given is that the Krogan are an aggressive, violent, clannish, patriarchal, and predatory species. This is meant to be contrasted with Eve's and Rex's social reform. Feminist-leaning fans of the series might cite the female warlord Shiagar, who became a prominent figure during the Krogan rebellions, as evidence of some ancient sense of Krogan sexual equality. As the wiki states, quote, "A female Krogan warlord, Shiagar, actually used her rare fertility to draw the strongest males to her band, but even she couldn't hold out against Turian peacekeeping forces, who finally killed her at the Battle of Canrum," unquote. Putting aside that Shiagar's rise to power occurred at the end of the Krogan rebellions, long after the collapse of industrial Krogan society and the rise of the supposed patriarchy, what we see here is that her value was entirely derived from her fertility after the genophage was deployed. In fact, the wiki explicitly states this. Quote, "She had, through viciousness and cunning, parlayed her unique value into a position of power. Krogan males competed for the right to join her band and lie with her," unquote. Curiously, this appears to be a historic precursor to Rex's social reforms. Shiagar ruled a small band of Krogan via restricted access to her vagina. Rex is essentially enabling this same form of governance on a larger scale. The females of his clan convinced him, perhaps through viciousness and cunning, to put all the females of all the other clans into a single camp and then grant them complete autonomy. And now, Tuchanka and the Krogan race are effectively a de facto gynecocracy. Now, perhaps the warlord Shiagar was an attempt to insert sexual equality into Krogan lore, but if it was, then it humorously failed, and its failure speaks to how frequently progressive narratives within Mass Effect are plagued by internal self-contradiction. Often the writers suggest that the Solarian genophage reduced the Krogan to their current primitive state of sexual inequality and brutish behavior. It's an argument that echoes sentiments of Africa is underdeveloped because of European colonialism.
That's what the genophage reduced us to. Animals.
The problem here is that even within established lore, the collapse of Krogan civilization occurred 2,000 years before Solarian intervention. In other words, Tuchanka being turned into a radioactive wasteland had absolutely nothing to do with the Solarians. But this is where Eve's assertion comes into play, that the rise of power-hungry males led to the toxic patriarchy responsible for their decline. The push within Mass Effect to replace patriarchy with female equality mirrors real-life attempts to ahistorically place women in positions of power and influence that they rarely held in order to justify equality measures in the present via a false sense of tradition. The idea here is to convince the player that a true Krogan was always one who valued sexual equality, and that the so-called traditionalists, opposing Rex's reformation, are actually usurpers of tradition. The same tactic is often applied today in real life. We want women to be equal to men, and we want blacks to feel like they're part of European history. So we reinterpret or revise everything to fit this narrative. Now, there are plenty of things about the ecology of Tuchanka that don't hold up to scrutiny. For example, thresher moles have no adequate food sources for their mass, and it's hard to believe that the Krogan were building megalithic structures as giant sandworms burrowed underneath the soil. But my goal here wasn't to establish who or what traditional Krogan society actually was. Rather, I wanted to focus on the nature of the competing narratives and what they signaled to the audience. The shamans assert that Krogan society collapsed when the Krogan grew weak, but feminist Eve attributes the decline to the rise of patriarchy and the undermining of the ancient egalitarian Krogan ways. The result of Krogan industrialization was nuclear warfare, an outcome not entirely implausible for humans in the 20th century. And this is probably one of the reasons why the writers at BioWare inserted such an idea into Krogan lore. It's a kind of easily accessible pan-human commentary on how we might all destroy ourselves.
Men like you built the hydrogen bomb. Men like you thought it up. You don't know what it's like to really create something, to create a life. To feel it growing inside you. All you know how to create is death and destruction.
Mom!
I take it you're a scientist.
I'm not just a scientist. Without me, those mouth-breathing fools wouldn't have weapons or bombs to kill things with. My predecessor said no one would understand the true worth of my work. As I pulled my blade from his chest, I knew he was telling the truth.
Like Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, Eve asserts that patriarchy is responsible for this, and in order to rebuild civilization, the females have to take charge. There's no shortage of woke academics today positing such ideas, and Mass Effect's writers probably enticed young impressionable men to agree by slapping a 7-foot, 330-pound frog with serrated teeth on top of a sexual liberation narrative.